So now we have to ask ourselves, these people, these same bloodlines, these same people, what are the odds that the Bushes, who is the leader of the free world, and the Windsors, who are the leaders of what's left of the British Empire, what's the odds that these two families that are blood related, so you're actually talking about one family, are running the Western civilization? What are the odds of that? More details and ruled by secrecy. And I thank you for your time, and I hope I've helped put some of this together for you. I don't think we have much time left, but anybody has an important question, come to the microphone and I'll try to answer it. Yes, Colonel.
Jim, in speaking about the Skull and Bone Society as a recruiting and grooming tool for the world government, you said that they find those with ability and, quote, who are more compliant. What evidence you have for that more compliant part?
Well, simply for the mere fact that the ones who aren't compliant go on off and they don't get leadership positions, and the ones who are compliant get the leadership positions. When I say compliant, I mean, maybe I could have used another word. Let's say they find people who are more in tune with their worldview.
Thank you.
Compliant kind of implies that they order them around. It's probably not that direct.
Good presentation, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to comment on your United States note that Kennedy was attempting to put into existence. I did want to mention that that was going to be backed by silver, so there was some backing behind it.
Yeah.
And also the executive order number that Kennedy wrote to establish that, if people want to write this down, was Executive Order 11110. And you can check that out, where it established the U.S. note. And the thing that I wanted to make comment about is that LBJ did not choose to continue publishing and minting the coin that Kennedy had started, because this would have killed the golden goose that the Federal Reserve had in position. It would have, and that was just too much of a status change for this country and for the very people you've been talking about.
Exactly. That's one of the reasons they wanted him in.
Exactly. But from another book that you wrote, I would like for you to maybe just briefly go over the coup of 1934 and how that affected our current status.
Right.
If you could take just a synopsis. Thank you.
I'll try to make feedback. Okay, try to make this brief. He asked about the coup of 1934. This was well established, little publicized, and you never heard about it in your history classes. In 1934, 1 year after Hitler had taken over total control as dictator of America, some of the wealthy families in this country, okay, the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the Carnegies, they decided we needed to have something like that here. And they approached a former general with the Marine Corps, General Smedley Butler, and they proposed to him that they would put up the money to fund a whole several 100,000 revolutionaries, and that we would have a coup in the United States of America, and they wanted Smedley Butler to be the new dictator, military dictator of the United States. Smedley Butler, to his everlasting credit, said to himself, this is treason. And he didn't really say anything to them, but he went along with it for a little while until he could figure out who was behind it, what all they were doing. Then he went to Franklin Roosevelt and told him what was going on. And of course, Roosevelt had a real bad problem. If he got up publicly and said this is what was going on, it could shake all the financial institutions of this country to the bone. The Federal Reserve System would be in a shambles. There could even possibly lead to some sort of civil war. So what they did was leak this story to the papers. Most of the papers around the country never even bothered to report on it. New York Times did report on it. Congress held some hearings for about 2 years until everything died down. They basically confirmed everything that Smedley Butler told them, but then that's where it was left. It was like, a lot of these people who were involved in this fled the country at the time and only later came back. So don't believe that there can't be an attempt at a coup in this country, because there was in 1934. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you for this presentation today, and thank you for having the courage to bring this information forward to us. And I'd like to know if you've ever heard of a document called the Protocols of the... I wonder if you've heard of a document called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion?
Yes. Let me address this real quick. I addressed this in Rule by Secrecy. He's asking about the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. First and foremost, yes, it is a hoax that was perpetrated by the Tsarist police during World War I in an effort to try to stigmatize the Jews in Russia at that time and gather support for the Tsar. However, the tenets of this thing are too serious, too detailed, too thoughtful. If you'll go back, you'll find that some of the alteration they did was change Sion, S-C-I-O-N, to Zion, Z-I-O-N, in an effort to try to lay it off onto the Jews. Sion, of course, brings us into the Priory of Sion, and several scholars have decided that the protocols are legitimate, but they are a document of the Illuminati, not the Jews, okay? So what you have to do, my advice to you, is to try to find a copy of the protocols and read them. It is really chilling, because it's just like the report from Iron Mountain. They can claim it's a hoax, but when you read it, you know this is not a hoax. It's a game plan for taking over the world. But again, let me emphasize, this was not done by the Jews, okay? The Jews have been as victimized by these people as everybody else.
Yeah, I have one correction on your timeline. You said Eisenhower and Dulles got us into the Vietnam War. Eisenhower kept us out of Dien Bien Phu when the French were trying to get us into the war. He stated that it's the wrong war, the wrong place, at the wrong time. The guy who got us into the war was JFK.
Well, I would disagree with you on that, although what you said essentially is correct. The reason that they didn't want to go in with the French is because they didn't want the French in there. They wanted to wait and let the French get run out so that we wouldn't have any competition when we moved in. And all I can tell you is that C.L. Sulzberger of the New York Times said that John Foster Dulles personally told him that he created CETO to give the president the power to intervene in Southeast Asia. I do agree with you. I think Eisenhower, being a general and having come through a world war, was hesitant to get us involved in a war over there. That's why all he did was start to send military advisors. And that's all JFK did. He increased them. When he took office, there were like 5,000 or 6,000 military advisors in Southeast Asia, and by the time he was assassinated in fall of '63, that had been increased to like 12,000. So there were, but they were military advisors, okay? And yes, they went out on patrols, and yes, if they got in a firefight, they would shoot back to defend themselves, but it was only Lyndon Johnson that put ground combat troops in Vietnam and ordered up Rolling Thunder, and that's when the war really got underway. Yeah.
Jim, I was wondering if you could offer any comments on FEMA, also its authority and possible place and role in this game.
I got a question for you all. Since when is it the job of FEMA to investigate the tragedy of the space shuttle? And since when is it the job of FEMA? Who investigated the World Trade Center bombing? Was it the New York Fire Department? No. Was it the New York Police Department? No. Was it the FBI? No. It was FEMA. And what did FEMA do? They hired 26 structural engineers, rushed them through there, let them go there for a day and a half, wouldn't let them look at most of the stuff, already were shipping the metal out of there, would not allow them to do tests on it. The head of the panel even complained, but then based on what little they got to see and what they were told, they finally issued a report and said, well, airplanes hit the building, I guess the temperatures got high and they all collapsed. There was no investigation, and it was all covered up by FEMA.
What about constitutional power or a possible place in this whole power game?
Constitutional power? Well, you know, we have a constitution, and let me, don't anybody get me wrong, you know, the form of government that we pay lip service to in this country, I will be the first to agree, is the finest that has ever been put together in the history of this world. Our problem is not the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. Our problem is that we're not adhering to it. We're not following the Constitution of this country.